Entrepreneurial thinking is not a trait, it's a thinking style. And there is a difference because we are born with traits. Thinking is something we can work on. We all hear about the word neuroplasticity. Our brain can rewire itself, and our habits of thinking can be changed by thinking differently enough times that our brain will follow a different pathway next time.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. I'm Katie Woods, Ecosystem Development Executive at Strathclyde Inspire, and today I'm delighted to be joined with Dr. Lucrezia Casulli, Senior Lecturer at the Hunter Centre for Entrepreneurship, and Dr. Suzanne Mawson, Reader at the Hunter Centre for Entrepreneurship. Today, we're going to be discussing Suzanne and Etzia's new book, Entrepreneurial Thinking, Mindset and Action, which delves into the essence of entrepreneurship, presenting it not merely as a pathway to business creation, but as a set of skills and behaviours that can assist anyone with generating innovative ideas, creating value, and achieving their goals, whatever they may be. This viewpoint is actually a key part of Strathclyde's sector-leading Entrepreneurship for All approach, which seeks to make entrepreneurial learning opportunities available to all of its students, regardless of their topic of study. So we are particularly excited to hear how this book will equip a new generation with the skills they need to be change makers. Thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne and Etzia, and congratulations on the book launch. Very exciting. So firstly, I just wanted to ask, what motivated you both to write about entrepreneurial thinking, and how did the idea for this book come to life?
So at the time, this was maybe 3.5 years ago, there was a lot of conversation and use of the word entrepreneurial mindset. All of a sudden, it was everywhere. And it was in the press, it was being used in policy documents. The Scottish government used it in the Can Do initiative. It was in the Scottish policy for national economic transformation. From Europe, we had the entrepreneurial competencies framework. It was everywhere. And we were starting to be approached to teach classes on entrepreneurial mindset as being known to be the people that study entrepreneurial thinking academically. But funnily enough, there was no book on this. And nobody could really actually tell us what entrepreneurial mindset was or is. So we decided that we needed a source. We couldn't find one. And we thought, let's just make our own. We knew what the literature was. It wasn't called entrepreneurial mindset. It was called something else. Entrepreneurial cognition, entrepreneurial thinking. And we knew what that was needed. So we thought, let's go for it. Let's make it.
We also wanted something that looked and felt different. A lot of what we talk about is about developing our creativity, thinking about what's possible rather than what is. We do a lot of experiential learning in our classes, and we know that from a skills and competences perspective, entrepreneurial thinking is something that we only get better at with practice. And so we really wanted to try to push the boundaries of the sort of standard textbook that we're used to seeing and our students were used to working with, that we really didn't feel was enabling the kinds of messages that we wanted to promote. So we really wanted to not only develop a book that had a new area of focus, but also to do something that felt very different than a conventional book. And we hope that we've achieved this with our what we call a hybrid textbook workbook. If anyone has a better term for it, we are still struggling ourselves, but that's how we think about it. It's not just something to be read and then stuck on a shelf. We really want this to be used regularly. We want to see it be annotated and sticky notes, dog-eared, pages torn out. We really want to see it be worked through, not just once in a class, but also something that can follow people through their own learning journey, whether that's through a degree program or whether that's through their own personal and professional development longer term.
That's brilliant. And that was something that I noticed right away when I picked up the copy. It's such an interactive and engaging book. It does not look like the textbooks back 10, 12 years ago when I was at university. And I really love that you're encouraging people to use it, write in it and make it kind of their own and what's going to work for them as well, which is a really brilliant and very innovative way itself of how to approach that. So thank you. That's fantastic. Your book suggests that entrepreneurial thinking goes beyond creating new businesses. Can you elaborate on why this is so important, firstly, and then also how this mindset can be beneficial in non-business contexts?
Sure. So when we think about the word entrepreneurship is mentioned, the first thing we think about is business creation. It's become synonymous. And in fact, all the books we could find were on business startup, business model canvas, the 24 steps to disciplined entrepreneurship. And that's fine. There is a place for that. But there is something else here at play. It's about developing the soft skills of the individual so that they can take charge of their lives and make their lives meaningful in a way that adds value to them, but also to their communities, to their employers. And it goes back to this idea of entrepreneurial people and cultures, not just about starting businesses, but about being innovative in our own lives. Why is that important? Never like now, the pace of change has become so fast. We are required to innovate constantly. Companies are required to innovate constantly. Individuals will not hold down to the same job or the same career for the duration of their lives. So we're all becoming entrepreneurs in our own lives, and we are becoming entrepreneurs in our own employment. Employers are telling us that they want people with an entrepreneurial mindset. They are telling us that they don't just want people who have technical skills. They can do coding, they can do engineering projects, but they also want people with a particular attitude, people who are self-starters, people who are idea generators, people who are solution-oriented, they are resilient, they will not give up. And in organizational context, what that means is that you're not waiting to be micromanaged. You are taking the initiative, you are not waiting for protocols. Protocols cannot exist when you are in transition. Protocols can only exist when you are stable. But the points of stability in a changing environment are very few and far between. So people need to be prepared for that. And instead of pushing against change, they need to embrace it and run with it and actually be contributors to that change.
We also see an increasing emphasis on and focus on for many organizations, whether those are private sector organizations, public sector organizations, community, grassroots partnerships. We see an increasing focus on tackling big societal issues. Those we use the term in our book, wicked problems. So those problems that on the surface have no solution, that have very few boundaries. They're so complicated. There's so many parts involved. We struggle psychologically to try and think about what we could even do. And increasingly, these are the kinds of issues that we need to tackle, both to be able to engage in business, to be able to have healthy, flourishing societies, and to be able to ensure the longevity of culture, of planet, of the sort of space that we find ourselves in. And so we see entrepreneurial thinking skills as the sort of foundation that not only will let people start businesses or create value in existing organizations, but they're also the skills that will allow people to tackle some of these big challenges, to start chipping away at and making small contributions to these things that we know we need to address, if not to try to work towards a solution for.
Gosh, that's so interesting. Thank you so much. That sounds amazing. And yeah, let's hope that can go ahead and this book will help and aid that. What core principles of entrepreneurial thinking are highlighted in your book or that you want to particularly highlight today?
So when we put together the book, we sort of started from a bit of a blank canvas. And as Etsy has said, there is a literature that exists. It's a little bit fragmented. So we had to start pulling together themes and issues, principles from across a number of different disciplines, from neuroscience through to anthropology, through to cognitive sciences, business and management, entrepreneurship. So we've tried to distill all of this. I suppose a key principle that we've been working with is that entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial mindset is something that can be learned. It's something we can teach, and it's something that we can learn through sustained effort and practice. So that's sort of one of the key principles that underpinned what we discuss in the book. We see entrepreneurial thinking at the level of an individual. So our first section of our book focuses very much on individual level elements, and then also interpersonal elements as well. So not only how we behave as individuals, but how we then collaborate and work with others.
And for the longest time, when you think about the individual level entrepreneurship, there have been ideas that there are traits that entrepreneurs have that other people don't have. Now, that literature is old. It has been proven to be partially not particularly true. Indeed, people can be born with characteristics that are conducive to entrepreneurial activity. Some people are resilient by nature. Some people are detail-oriented by nature. Some people are, creative by nature. But none of these combinations will work for everyone in every context. So one of the key core principles of the book is that, for a start, entrepreneurial thinking is not a trait, it's a thinking style. And there is a difference because we are born with traits. Thinking is something we can work on. We all hear about the word neuroplasticity. Our brain can rewire itself, and our habits of thinking can be changed by thinking differently enough times that our brain will follow a different pathway next time. So that's a core principle. The other core principle is that, like I said, not one single combination of these factors will work perfectly in every context. So the idea for the book is that people become aware of what the principles are and then think about how they apply in their context, in their country, in their culture, in their environment, industry-wise, and make them work for them. So no one size fits all. And the other principle is that without reflecting on ourselves, we are not going to change that. You need to know where you're starting from. You need to become a knower of your own character. And be prepared to take a hard look at that. Some of us don't like to look in the mirror and see things about ourselves that maybe are not perfect. And that is exactly what's required here.
Yeah, it sounds like, anyone that's going to pick up this book and get stuck right in, they're going to go on a little bit of a journey as well of like self-discovery, maybe find some uncomfortable truths in there, but then ultimately come out as like a more resilient, like person with these like core principles of being able to take that forward. So can you share some insights from the book that individuals can use to adopt an entrepreneurial mindset in both their personal and their professional lives?
So the starting point would be have an open-mindedness. Everybody says that they are open-minded. But true open-mindedness is not about, I'll accept someone who is different from me. True open-mindedness is about understanding that there is an awful lot that you don't know, and you should focus on what you don't know rather than what you know. And the other thing I would say is be growth-minded. Again, lots of misconceptions around what that is. Growth-mindedness is not about growing a business. It's about growing yourself as a person. And for that to happen, you need to believe that you can adapt and change and learn. So these are two necessary and sufficient and not sufficient, conditions to start. In more practical terms, what that means is if you want to create value, well, for a start, take a break from your daily routine and from your busy life and think, what do I want to do with my life? You only have one. Do you really want to waste it doing whatever society tells you should do? Is there any value that you can create that is going to give meaning to your life, to that of those you care about, the causes you care about? And then take action. Don't wait to know everything in order to act. I think one of the main reasons why people don't act, even when they have entrepreneurial aspirations in every sector, is that they're waiting to have it all mapped out. And that doesn't work because entrepreneurial activity is inherently uncertain. If you wait to have the answers, it's too late. So start, make mistakes, and embrace the mistakes. People are sometimes, all of us are sometimes too preoccupied with looking perfect all the time. We're looking like we are not going to get anything wrong, having this glamorous, polished, LinkedIn account or whatever. The truth of the matter is, if you're trying to do something novel, things will go wrong. Things will not go as you planned. You will have to go back to the drawing board. And there's no shame in that. So embrace it.
Yeah, I think it's about developing comfort with the potential for failure, for learning from that. And that's something we spend quite a bit of time in the book as well. It probably goes beyond just being comfortable with failure, but recognizing where failure is powerful. Generally, when things go well, we don't learn. We maybe get a nice feeling and a little pat on the back, but it's the circumstances where something hasn't worked well or it's been really challenging for us that we learn the most. And so it's not just a case of becoming comfortable with failure, but also trying to recognize the benefits and the value that failure offers to us. We actually have a wee exercise in our book where we try to celebrate failures and trying to actually record all of that so that we have a record of all the things that haven't worked that then have helped us to develop, to become better at what it is we're trying to achieve.
I love that, like very positive attitude towards like challenges and failure and bouncing back basically, isn't it, from that? And that is that resilience piece as well. So fantastic. Thank you. What do you see as the most significant challenges to adopting an entrepreneurial mindset? And how does your book go about addressing these challenges?
So this is something that we've reflected on a lot over the last few years. And one of the biggest challenges we tend to find is a reluctance or a resistance to self-reflection. Lucrezia mentioned earlier, looking in the mirror, it can be a little bit tough. Sometimes when we look at ourselves, we see things that we're not happy with or we're not overly proud of, things we'd like to be better at. And it is sometimes easier not to engage in that process of reflection, not to look at ourselves. We also tend to learn through school and through education how to assess the external environment. We're pretty good at seeing what other people are doing, what other organizations and institutions are doing, but we're not always given time and space to learn how to reflect on ourselves. And so for us, it's about trying to develop comfort and awareness of the importance of self-reflection. If we don't know what it is we're assuming or how we're thinking or how we're feeling, we won't understand what it is we're actually doing and why we're behaving in a particular way. So some comfort there, but also building reflection as a skill. And this is something we spend a lot of time in our trying to accomplish in our classes. It's certainly a theme the whole way through the book, trying to build a structured approach to learning reflection as a skill. And like most skills, it's something we get better at through practice, through trial and error, but it is something that we can learn. And there are lots of really nice different ways of reflecting that meet different personal preferences and personal learning styles.
It's also about core beliefs sometimes. So Suzanne always tells me that I need to give a definition of core beliefs. So the best way I can describe core beliefs is the little voice in your head that tells you, you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing that, that's not the damn thing here. And usually they come from the environments where we are raised, the environments where we work. And some of these core beliefs can be negative. They can prevent us from trying because we are afraid of looking bad, we are afraid of being judged. It's not just about failure in terms of loss of capital or loss of work. Is also about loss of reputation, being seen to be different. And related to that is we cannot have entrepreneurially minded people in non-entrepreneurially minded cultures and environments. You need a critical mass of people who embrace change, embrace innovation, understand that failure is part and parcel of that. They don't put people down, they raise people up. A critical mass of that is key. When we talk to our students, when we deliver this class, they say, yeah, I love all of this, but when I go back to my country, you don't do that. You just don't stick your head above the parapet, because that's not the damn thing. Again, the more we talk about this entrepreneurial mindset, the more people embrace it, the more it's going to be viable, because we're going to have environments that are conducive to it.
And a cultural shift.
And that's the key part of being change makers, isn't it? And this is like a good starting point to keep building from. Absolutely. So as academics at Scotland's leading entrepreneurial campus, you're helping transform the curriculum to encourage and enable students to unlock their entrepreneurial potential. How does your book and research fit into the entrepreneurial ecosystem here at Strathclyde?
So over the past few years, we've been really privileged to have a lot of university support to play with our ideas and our research around mindset, to think about how that's going to inform teaching and learning activity. We've been able to develop classes at undergraduate, master's, post-experience, MBA levels. And our book, I think, really provides a really nice foundation for all of these existing classes. We're also using this as the basis for our new Strathclyde Inspire large-scale open elective that's going to bring entrepreneurship to students across the university. So it will be opened out as an elective for all 25,000 students. 21,000 students. And the goal is to try and make entrepreneurship more accessible and entrepreneurial thinking. Our book provides a really useful space to try and foster some of these skills, these attitudes amongst people who may not ever choose to start a business, but who are going to be creating value in their organizations or in the roles that they do undertake, and tackling those wicked problems that we're facing in this world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And could you discuss any policy interventions that you believe are crucial for supporting the development of entrepreneurial ecosystems, particularly in Scotland?
Yeah, so I think we're really, really fortunate here in Scotland. We've got an extremely active entrepreneurial ecosystem, tons of support, tons of providers, lots of amazing initiatives. What we tend to see is a focus on new ventures or scaling and growing ventures. And of course, there is a place for that. But what we tend to see is missing are the foundations or the antecedents of that. So how do we get people to think in a way that gives them the possibility of perhaps choosing to do a new venture, or perhaps bringing that ability to be innovative and creative, to push boundaries, to grapple with uncertainty, bringing those skills within existing organizations? And I think what we don't have quite so much of yet is a series of interventions really focused on building thinking and mindset, developing awareness of the importance of these skills, building comfort and competence, and providing structured support for skill building in these areas.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So I think you've mentioned it already. The world is constantly changing, potentially faster now than ever. How do you see the role of entrepreneurial thinking evolving in the future? And are there new areas where you believe it will become increasingly important?
So, entrepreneurial mindset to us, quite simply, is about future-proofing ourselves. And in the book, we use the work of Gabriela Rosen-Kellerman and Martin Seligman. And they wrote a book called Tomorrow Mind. And when we looked at Tomorrow Mind, which we mentioned in the book, by the way, you find that their skills map exactly into the entrepreneurial mindset skills that we are talking about in our own book, because they are saying that as the pace of change increases, we need to focus more on AI, for example. And the pace of adoption of AI in every sector is accelerating. And that means that anything that can be potentially scripted and there's a protocol attached to it, AI will be able to do for us probably faster, probably more efficiently, with less, fewer errors, fewer mistakes than us. And that should not be something that we are afraid of, because if we embrace an entrepreneurial mindset, we can reinvent our role in society and in our jobs to do more with being creative and with making leaps forward in terms of our innovation and creativity. And that is going to be what the jobs of tomorrow are going to be about. So an entrepreneurial mindset is very, very useful there. And other angle that I think is going to become increasingly important is leveraging diversity. Suzanne said earlier that the problems we are facing now are so complex, so uncertain, so unpredictable, that not one type of expertise or one type of knowledge can fix those. And we have this tendency that we turn to the experts when we want to fix a problem. But entrepreneurial thinking encourages us to take on board views from multiple people, from people who think differently. Sometimes that's hard because sometimes we don't see eye to eye, but that's going to become necessary. We know that diversity is the sauce where innovation cooks, but we don't really practice it as much as we should. And in entrepreneurial thinking, in the book, certainly, we talk a lot about how to interact with others that are different from us under conditions where there are no clear guidelines. And that is going to become necessary, I think, in the future.
That was beautifully put. Wow. I absolutely feel inspired just listening to you there, the passion. I absolutely love it. So yeah, brilliant. I think we could say that writing a book is an entrepreneurial journey in itself. I'm sure you had to be persistent sometimes and solve problems yourselves when you were thinking about what kind of content you were going to put in. So what personal lessons in entrepreneurial thinking have you learned through the process of writing this book?
Again, because we say that entrepreneurship is a journey. And writing this book was a journey. Many people think that you have an idea and the idea is kick. And that's not true. That's not true in business startups, and that's not true for our book. It's not true for anything. You have an idea, and then you start to interact with people, you start to explain the idea, and then they maybe interpret it slightly differently, and they react to that, and then what they're telling you, maybe you think, oh, that's better than what I thought. And it's a co-creation process, and very much that's what we went through. We went to Sage with our ideas. They came back saying, oh, I've thought about this, I've thought about that. And then we had the reviewers that completely, again, changed what we were thinking of doing. We had to convey to our graphic designer what we wanted the book to look like. And we had a few, how we were going to express, how we were going to talk about something that didn't exist. was interesting because we're used to talking about things that already exist. But every time you're doing something new, the thing is metaphorical. So you need to find a way to talk about it.
And we have a chapter on communication in the book, and I think it was really helpful for us to go through this process in terms of explaining an idea that we have that has no prior precedent and very few easy ways of explaining it, and trying through different approaches to communicate this and understanding what that communication process looks like and where the complexity lies.
Yeah. And the other thing that I personally learned, because in the book, again, we talk about entrepreneurs are not lone wolves. It's about teams and it's about groups, and we are very much a team. And we have complementary skills. So going through the book with Suzanne, I learned that, I can come up with some creative, ideas for writing, but I need to have time and space. With a looming deadline, my creative brain shuts down and I cannot do anything. And I knew that about myself, but never like now. So earlier, we were having that informal chat before we started recording. You asked us, how long did it take you? Well, I started 18 months before the deadline because I knew that 6 months before the deadline, I was not going to be able to concentrate because I would feel the pressure. Suzanne, very different. 6 months before the deadline, Suzanne is ready to go and ready to put all her energy into this. And she's texting me morning and night, where is this? Where is that? What are we going to do here? So very different that way. Also, I learned that my creative outputs can be a little bit difficult, a little bit maybe impenetrable sometimes. And it's lucky that I was working with Suzanne because she was rephrasing some of my content to make it more accessible to people. And again, very complimentary that way. So we were very much a partnership. And I believe most entrepreneurial endeavors have to be like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that issue of partnership and collaboration. And I think this is the key learning point for me. We've sort of learned, we've done a lot of work together over the years, but I think we now know each other on a much deeper level. And as Etsy said, complementary skills. She has these brilliant, amazing, groundbreaking ideas that are totally infeasible and impractical. And yet, the more we then spend time thinking about it, the more we realize that actually it's not infeasible and it's not impractical. We just don't have what we need to be able to move in that way or to accomplish this. And so I think I've learned a lot from this process about being ambitious, being bold, a lot of the university values that we sort of subscribe to, and being challenged to push really hard and really far. And I think Etsy has provided that challenge, but also because this book has been co-created in a way that other textbooks maybe aren't, we've brought in a huge number of voices. And we've been really lucky to have a huge number of supporters, not just here at Strathclyde, but around Scotland, around the UK. We've had contributors coming from overseas as well. And we're able to bring in their ideas, their perspectives, and also they have challenged us in our own thinking. They've brought in new ideas, caused us to question some of ours, and they've also provided that sort of critical friend position that's asked us to think about what else we could be doing. And they've really helped us to push the bar further and further and further. And I think we're really grateful grateful for that kind of challenge.
I did notice actually that Inspire supporter Becky Pick from Pick Protection has a really interesting, good case study in there. So that was really, really nice to see. And I think that actually all leads us on nicely to just asking, how would you like people to use this book?
So what we're hoping is that people will engage with this and they'll read it. They'll note things in it. They'll go back to it multiple times. We envisage this as something that you don't just read once and stick on a shelf or use for a class and then put it back in the library. We'd really like this to be something that is annotated and that grows with people, not only during a particular class or a particular learning journey, but also as part of longer term personal and professional development. Personally, I'll be really delighted if we see things being really dog-eared, pages all folded over, lots of annotation. There is tons of space in the book to write in. We have purposely tried to build this as a usable resource. We've also tried to include a whole range of different activities and resources, we're so conscious that if something's going to be personal, and we really want this to be personal and used by people, we're really conscious that we all respond differently to different forms of media. We all have different roles. We work in different organizations or different sectors. And so it's really important to have diversity of experiences and activities. And so we've got self-reflection exercises to build self-reflection skills. We've got TED Talk links, we've got podcasts, we've got links to inspire cases, we've got lovely excerpts that have been written by or prepared for the book to talk through different entrepreneurial experiences and different examples of organizations or contexts in which entrepreneurial thinking can take place. We've got a lot to support self-reflection and personal development. We've got bits on developing habits and how small changes accrue big impact over time. So lots of different resources to be able to have people dip in and out of. And we do hope that although they may not all be relevant for all people, that we've got a nice variety here so that everybody who works through this book has something that speaks to them, something that helps them in terms of their own journey and developing their own mindset and skills.
I think it's important for people to recognize that mindsets don't shift in the duration of you reading the book. It takes months and years for new neural pathways to be formed. And that means that we would expect people to use it, put it down, go back a chapter, then go forward. Although it's presented linearly from chapter 1 to 12, you will find that people will go forward one step and then something happens in their life and they take a step back, and they should not be discouraged. Like every self-development, it takes a long time. What we've also done is we've tried to bridge the gap between the academic literature and the pop sci literature that some people talk about. So we've mentioned a lot of books that are in the popular press that people may find more user-friendly. We have not created something that is entirely new, but we have brought different perspectives in that hopefully people can relate to. So some of the sources people will know already. Hopefully they can understand how they relate to developing these skills for themselves in a new context. So yeah, just make it, put it in your office and use it multiple times and make sure you got it out, basically.
So for any listeners who are intrigued by our conversation here today, how can they get involved and take the first step towards embracing the principles discussed in your book?
Buy a copy of the book. Of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? Well, no, the truth of the matter is, if somebody's listening to this podcast, that's already an indication that they are interested and they realize the value of developing an entrepreneurial mindset. There are lots of resources online, and indeed we use some of them. They're freely available online, and we use some of them in the book. One starting point that maybe we can recommend is the Ryan Gottfredson self-assessment test. It will test you for 4 elements of entrepreneurial thinking, including growth mindset and open-mindedness that I was mentioning earlier. But there are many more. There are innovation self-assessment tests, creativity tests, lots of it. If you're based in Scotland, we have the best resource ever in Strathclyde Inspire and in the Hunter Centre. Engage with us. There are so many events going on, and all of the cases that come out of Inspire or of our classes all speak to this idea of entrepreneurial thinking, regardless of venture creation. Sometimes we use examples from business venturing, but the same principles cannot be applied across the board. So yeah, just keep staying tuned in.
Yeah, and please do reach out as well. We very much see this, although it's a published book, we kind of see it as a first draft.
Yeah.
And we are really looking for feedback, for conversations, for engagement, for challenge as well. We'd love to know what is resonating and what's not, what is relevant in one context or one organization or sector, and what isn't. What are the things that we've not covered that we want more on, or the things that actually we need a little bit less on? So we'd very much love for people to reach out, to start a conversation, and we can all work together to develop our understanding of what mindset looks like, and hopefully to develop future iterations of these kind of materials.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat today. I'm feeling very inspired and invigorated by our conversation. It's been so interesting, and I'm sure our podcast listeners will have loved it as well. So thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much
Katie,
for having us.
So thank you so much again to Suzanne and Ezia for taking the time to speak to us today. Entrepreneurial Thinking is now available to purchase from Sage. It stands as a beacon for educators, students, professionals, and anyone eager to embrace an entrepreneurial approach to life's challenges. Make sure you use code UKBMAN30 for 30% off. That's code UKBMAN30 for 30% off. Click the link in the podcast description for more information. And that's it for this episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and remember to hit that like, follow, or subscribe button on whichever platform you're using.